Now, we've been joined by a lawyer, Wahab Shittu. He is the lawyer to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. It's nice to have you on Breakfast this morning.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. And also joining us via Skype is a political commentator, Lanre Suraj. Lanre, it's good to have you on TVC Breakfast.
Always my pleasure. Good morning.
All right. Now, let's start it this way, Wahab. Let us have a basic understanding generally of when a chairman of the EFCC, when the outgoing or the outgoing one leaves, it takes some period of time before the next one takes office. Why is it like that?
Well, it is like that because the chairman of EFCC is not just an ordinary officer. Is the executive chairman of the body, as well as the chief accounting officer, by virtue of relevant statutory provisions. Again, such an officer, given his importance, must have his appointment confirmed by the Senate. The executive makes the appointment subject to the confirmation of the Senate. And we all know that this is a laborious process. So very often when the previous occupant leaves office, maybe either out of the expiration of his term or his relief of his appointment, there is always a intervening period before the successor is appointed. And usually the law, if you look at the provisions of the Interpretation Act, the authority who has the power to appoint also has the power to appoint somebody in an acting capacity. That derives from constitutional provisions as well as the provisions of relevant interpretation statutes. So if you appoint somebody in an acting capacity, it also has an advantage. You'll be able to understudy his performance and see whether it is a candidate that you ought to recommend for a substantive appointment. So the process of appointing somebody in an acting capacity also helps the system, because the appointer is in a position to be able to assess his performance. Usually, you have to balance records of performance, antecedents with actual performance. And you can see that in the case of Ibrahim Magu, this has really assisted, played out. The whole world has seen his performance.
All right, let's bring in Suraj Lanre here, whether he agrees with you. Of course, this fourth acting chairman, yet to be made substantive chairman of the EFCC, in quoting Buhari's assessment of his performance in the last 9 or so months that he's been there, record-breaking performance, transparency, integrity, and exceptional courage. This is how President Buhari has assessed the performance of Ibrahim Magu, and so he has written a letter, of course, to the Senate to make him a substantive chairman. Are you on the same page? I mean, within this 9 months or so, yes, 130 convictions. There have been so many high-profile cases of, corruption and all of that. Are you impressed with his performance so far? That's a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think like you already ruled out the figures, and then also the CV, and I think every Nigerian, every sincere and genuine Nigerians, not only within the country, even those outside, those in diaspora, would actually be proud to see the EFCC rising up to the expectation of many of Nigerians. And I think one of the other adjective that also, we can also call it qualification, that is also missing in the president's letter, is the hunger that you see more, in Magu against the cases and issues of corruption. And that is one of the propelling force that you need in anybody occupying that office. You must be angered by the spate of crime that has been committed against the state. You must also feel the hunger to see Nigerians who were entitled to many of the positive utilization of the resources. You feel anger seeing them living in abject poverty, and that I can see, which is linked with the raw courage, and then also leading to the results that we're seeing. I completely agree with the president in terms of approving and then also proposing the Senate's confirmation of Magu as a substantive chairman. But what we must note the fact that it takes this long, unfortunately, because we really are yet to get government and governance correct in Nigeria, and that gives you that leads you to a little historical review of how former chairmen of the commission were either summarily removed or changed. Ribadu was removed in such an unceremonial manner. Madam Farida was also removed out of serious agitation and demand by local and international communities with the abysmal performance that was experienced under her chairmanship. Ibrahim Lamudi was actually also asked to go on leave, though it was towards the end of his tenure, but it shows that the government was not actually really prepared for that also removal. Otherwise, you would have seen a process that must have led to a confirmation within a period of maximum of 2 to 3 months. But then it is a new government that was also trying to find its feet, so you can want to give a kind of excuse to that to some extent. But that should not continue. We must have a national anti-corruption strategy that shows the trend of how the government wants to drift in terms of combating and stamping corruption out of the system. Any failure to do this, we would only be having this episodic and whimsical approach to the appointment, removal, and then also the confirmation of leadership of the anti-corruption. Like I said, we have to do this with performance.
Okay. All right, let's give our viewers some background information.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission was established in 2003 by former President Olusegun Obasanjo with Nuhu Ribadu as its pioneer chairman. Ribadu was interplied and gallant enough to fight corruption in the country squarely, but the catchphrase, the fear of Ribadu is the beginning of wisdom, soon registered on the lips of many Nigerians at the time.
Now, in the course of his duty, it was reported that Ribadu was offered bribes to pervert the course of justice. Since Ribadu left the commission, his successors made little or no effort to sustain his legacy and restore the past glory of the anti-graft agency. Now, under their watch, high-profile cases were bungled and out-of-court settlements became the order of the day, as alleged treasury looters were more interested in fleecing their respective states by going into plea bargaining that was neither in the interest of their states nor their core aim of settling or setting up the commission.
All right. Now, the litany of failures of the commission to successfully prosecute high-profile cases under Farida Waziri is also worth talking about. Example of cases include the 17 billion naira police force of insurance scam by former Inspector General of Police Tafa Balogun. Others are the failed conviction of Ayo Fayoshi of Ekiti State before his re-election. Failed conviction of Peter Odele of Rivers State, Joshua Dare of Plateau State, Saminu Turaki of Jigawa, and Jody Nyame of Taraba State, to mention a few.
But analysts have also said that the commission lost its public support and credibility, as it is now perceived as an instrument of the federal government used against perceived political opponents, thereby derailing the enviable track set by Ribadu. Maybe this is where we should bring our guests in to respond to, this background that we have just reeled out, especially the fact that at a point the EFCC lost credibility. Yes, it used to be referred to, the ordinary Nigerian would say the fear of Ribadu was the beginning of wisdom. Can one really say that today, especially under this new management, if one might put it that way?
I think in answering that question, we must also go back to back to history. and found out that Ribadu brought in Magu. Magu has been part and parcel of EFCC operations.
Indeed, he did lead high-profile investigations.
Since the Ribadu days. The only time he was victimized or eased out of the system was when another chairman came in. And they felt his activities during the Ribadu era was too revolutionary. He was a victim of high-profile victimization. He went through a lot because of the interests of this country. He was he's a person very passionate about the fight against corruption. So he went through hell. But his record spoke for him. And he was brought back, particularly during the Ibrahim Lamode era. One thing that is very clear is that EFCC is as strong as the government of the day wants it to be. Okay. I think we must be very frank. If the body language of the ruling elite, of the government of the day, it will be very decisive in determining how effective EFCC is. Because, and the reason for this is very simple. The chairman of EFCC is an appointee of the president. So if the president is pro-corruption, he will do everything possible to frustrate the anti-corruption efforts. But if the president is somebody who's anti-corruption, like we have now, a president who has zero tolerance for corruption, who is known locally and internationally for his integrity. We have a vice president who's of that orientation. So if the number one man is not stealing, and the number two man is not stealing, that shows a lot in terms of leadership. So you need a character who is also of that orientation. And everybody will agree, going by the antecedents of Ibrahim Magu, there is that character. You cannot bring somebody who is pro-corrupt to come and work with Buhari or Usibajo that we know for their exemplary, corruption. So you need somebody like Magu to drive the process. Magu, like you mentioned, the assessment of the president cannot be faulted in terms of transparency, in terms of integrity, in terms of courage, and in terms of record-breaking performance. Magu is the man.
Okay, now let me bring in Lanre Suraj still on this issue. Lanre, you mentioned the days of, when you were talking earlier on, the days of Nuhu Ribadu as the chairman of the EFCC. If we have to make comparison between how EFCC was at that time and how EFCC is now generally, what's the difference between EFCC on both ends, from the beginning in Ribadu days and now as it is?
No, I think it will have to start from where my brother stopped, looking at the political leadership. The political leadership of the country says a whole lot about the performance of the institutions, especially with those who are appointees of the executive. And that is not only peculiar to Nigeria, and that we must be sincere and factual about. Once you have a government that is excessively compromised, it's extremely going to be difficult for law enforcement agencies, not only EFCC, the police, the ICPC, the Code of Conduct Bureau. One thing you must also note is that, interestingly, and I think that is also part of the challenge for this government, that is still ongoing challenge for this government, and also the credibility issue. It is only EFCC that is rising up and giving that profile of that integrity, anti-corruption for this government. The other agencies are still to recover from the years of locusts. The ICPC, the Code of Conduct Bureau, are still operating in the past. And I'm still wondering why we still have those leadership retained in spite of lack of no significant performance on the part of those agencies. But when you look at EFCC, like I said, from the past, with Ribadu brought about, my brother Wahab Shittu said, brought in Lamode, brought in Magu, and the rest of those guys. Those were the guys who were the brain behind most of the activities of the EFCC. Interestingly, Ribadu just also provided that leadership and also the courage and encouragement for most of them to do the work. Obasanjo was not entirely committed to that, but he had, a mad guy also in Ribadu who knows how to go about some of those things. It was extremely difficult bringing down the like of Tafa Balogun, who was very close to the president. And the same thing goes to the PDP chairman, who was also there, and also the Senate president under Obasanjo. And when it comes to the issue of President Goodluck Jonathan, or even before Jonathan, unfortunately, there's a difference between the president who is not corrupt and that who is fighting corruption. President Yar'Adua was not known to be corrupt in any way as a person, but he was overwhelmed by people around him. So fighting corruption was not a major issue for him, and that was what led to the unfortunate removal of Ribadu, and also, I must confess, almost led to the collapse of that government before death actually took him away. There was no doubt in the fact that President Goodluck Jonathan was extremely corrupt. He had no clue about issue of even governance. He was not interested in even revamping the economy or even repositioning the country. He was just interested in having his own fun, and then people were taking advantage of the system. So on that note, it was as to the extent, it was worse to the extent that even the First Lady interferes in the performance of the law enforcement agencies. These are fact-based issues. At those points, the best you can have of an anti-corruption agency was the best you can have was almost what you have with Lanre under that circumstance. All they would do is to do investigation. And interesting, even some of those investigations culminated in the prosecutions that you're having Magu doing now, and then have your file kept. So whatever performance you are having with Magu, it only tells you one thing, and one thing very clearly. Buhari has given a marching order. Do your job. I am not interested in influencing how you do it. All I want is performance and delivery. And that is the only reason why you can have a Magu who also has, like Mr. Wahab Shittu said, had all the experiences, went through the persecution under Madam Farida Waziri, to the extent that he was even arrested and detained, because he conducted many of the high-profile investigations you've had under EFCC. And that is where you have the acceptance at international level. I must confess to you, I was also reading the Sierra Leonean Anti-Corruption Agency came to Nigeria to understudy how EFCC is doing the thing. That is to tell you the amount of acceptability outside the country. And quite a number of them are also willing to even start returning money back to the country. These are a lot of accolades and Nigerians. I was also in Russia last year at the UNCAC meeting, and it was a different ball game, we at the international level with the perception and the rating of the Nigerian.
I'm going to put you on hold a little bit. Lanre, I'm going to put you on hold a little bit. Sorry.
Okay, finally.
Now, there are other information we'd like the people to have a basic understanding of. Now, let's take a look at some of the couple of cases initiated by the EFCC. Now, among the first set of people to fall under the Anti-Corruption Acts is the former National Security Advisor Sambo Dasuki, who is alleged to have diverted a huge sum of about $2.1 billion meant for the purchase of arms for the military.
Now, more prominent is the trial of the national publicity of the main opposition party, the PDP, Olisa Metu, who was arrested for complicity in the same $2.1 billion arms contract, and he's still facing trial. He has, however, agreed to return his share of the money. As a matter of fact, he says this is in support of President Buhari's anti-corruption war. Now, former Chief of Air Staff Adeshola Amosu is alleged to have taken some money from the Nigerian Air Force bank account to buy personal properties worth billions of naira. He was arraigned alongside two officials on a 26-count charge of stealing 50 billion naira.
Now, the nation's number 3 citizen, Senate President Bukola Saraki, who is also a flag-carrying member of the ruling All Progressive Congress, is under investigation. He has 2 cases pending, One is on the alleged false declaration of assets during his tenure as governor of Kwara State. The other is on the alleged forgery of Senate standing rules alongside his deputy Ike Ekweremadu of the PDP.
Another prominent case is that of retired Brigadier General Jafaru Isa, believed to have received over 100 million naira from Dasuki. An APC chieftain, he was arrested by the EFCC, but he paid 100 million naira and signed an undertaking to pay the rest.
Well, another prominent case is that of the, of the Ekiti State Governor Ayodele Fayose, who recently had his bank accounts frozen by the EFCC on allegations of receiving campaign funds from the office of the former National Security Advisor.
Now, recently, former Minister of Aviation Femi Fani-Kayode, alongside former Finance Minister Nenadi Usman, accused of diverting about 4.9 billion naira belonging to the federal government of Nigeria for political and personal uses. A few days ago, the EFCC arrested former Osun State Deputy Governor Iyola Omishore for allegedly receiving over 1.3 billion naira from the arms cash. All of these reports are almost dizzying for the average Nigerian. I mean, hearing about this, loads and loads of billions of naira, billions of dollars in some cases, and all of that. But there are many Nigerians who still question, this is to you, Mr. Wahab Shittu, that there really has been no closure to all of these cases, this really high-profile cases that we're having, that by now, one should have been able to say, look, a Dasuki is behind bars, or a Fayose for that matter, even though, of course, immunity protects him. But nothing has happened in terms of getting real convictions, apart from this 130 or so convictions that we are told that Magu has achieved, but they're not necessarily the people Nigerians want to see behind bars.
I think it will be very unfair, very unfair to say that nothing has happened. A lot has happened, particularly under Magu, in 6 months. And I will reel out some of the statistics. One, for instance, under Magu, a former Director General of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Raymond Omaseye, was convicted for 5 years and is still languishing in prison. A Lagos court registrar, Mrs. Rosulu Didowu Oluronke, was also sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Under Magu, a former chairman of Ogorimagongo, which is a case I handle, has been sentenced to 154 years, still in prison. A former Adamawa State Commissioner for Local Government Affairs, John Elias Babani, is serving 10 years imprisonment under Magu. George Obo is serving 3 years for selling vehicles belonging to the police equipment fund. And there's a court order to extradite the chief executive of Nigerian Security Printing and Mining Company, Ehi Okonimoyo, to the UK to face charges of corruption and money laundering on the sum of 750 million polymer bribery scandal. There's also a court order to extradite another Nigerian, fugitive, Francis Emota, to the UK for prosecution of trafficking of minors, in addition to some of the things you have mentioned. But the point that you have mentioned is also legitimate. All these achievements happen under the watch of Magu. And it shows that if it's confirmed, more can still take place. He's handicapped now because he's acting in an acting capacity. But when you now make him...
But in his acting capacity, he's been able to achieve these convictions.
Yes.
But the
so
fact
if you empower him further by confirming him, and now this consideration has nothing to do with politics. We are talking of Nigeria and national interest. Who is the person who can do this job, who can complement the efforts of this administration, who can act on behalf of you and I and reduce this corruption? It is Magu. But the point you have made is also very relevant. Why are we not having, why are we having slow motion in getting some of these convictions that Nigerians desire? The blame is collective. It's a stakeholders blame. You can attribute some of the blame to the system, which is slow. you can attribute some of the blame to the practitioners. Lawyers, both prosecution lawyers, defense lawyers, in terms of attitude.
Is it not the same system that made Farida Waziri, for example, to, in quote, fail, and Lamode, you know, those who came before?
I don't want to comment.
Is it the same? Is it not the same system?
On personalities. Like, for instance, there are those who will say that Farida Waziri also had his own achievements and his own challenges. You understand me? And you must also remember the fact that Farida Waziri operated under the Jonathan administration, whose body language does not seem to encourage the fight against corruption. So I don't want to talk about this, but I want to talk about moving Nigeria forward and what we can do to be able to reverse the trend that you have mentioned. We need attitudinal change on the part of all the stakeholders. Lawyers, prosecution lawyers must do their job effectively.
I remember the president.
Devoid of what?
The president has said that.
Devoid of compromise. Defense lawyers must work in line with the ethics of their profession. If you're a lawyer, if you are defending an accused person, primarily you owe a duty to the profession. You owe a duty to the temple of. You must have a regime that will sanction lawyers who act in breach of ethics. We do not have that here, personally. And that's why some lawyers, defense lawyers, carry on and are interested in stalling proceedings.
Isn't that where the NBA, the NJC
Yes! But you see, there are also prosecution lawyers who are not. Part of the blame can be put on the part of some of us who are prosecution lawyers. Again, some of the blame lies at the doorstep of investigation officers, those who are investigating. Some of the blame also lies at the doorstep of the bench. It's not all the, you have judges, most of the judges are upright, but there are some of them too who cannot be exonerated from blame. So it's a stakeholders challenge. So what do we need? What do we need to reverse this trend? One, Nigerians must learn, first of all, to be patient. You don't rush some of these cases to court. There must be efficient and effective investigation, devoid of compromise. There must be efficient and effective prosecution, devoid of compromise. There must be effective and efficient adjudication, devoid of compromise. There's no reason why any corruption case should last more than 6 months. There's no reason at all. That is why the Administration of Criminal Justice Act that has just been promulgated into law, 2015, has made far-reaching provisions to assist the prosecution of corruption. There's no reason why corruption cases cannot take place day by day, including Saturdays.
Okay, let's bring in Suraj here, talking about efficient investigation, which many people have criticized the EFCC of not necessarily being really thorough about. And it's a good thing to know that Magu is a financial crimes investigator, you know, who has a background in forensic accounting, training at FBI, London Met Police, and all of that. Do you think he's actually bringing his background to bear to rub off positively in, you know, the workings of the EFCC, the present-day EFCC? And you did say something earlier about the posture, you know, the temperament of Magu. You said he's angry enough, but don't you think this anger is possible? It's possible that it could actually blur his sense of judgment, you know, in such a way that he can do a good thing in a bad way, you know, fighting this anti-corruption war against the tenets of the rule of law.
No, I would actually want to first, just to say clearly that there's not going to be an end to this fight. So if people are expecting that we probably would have a kind of reprieve, we're still joking. It means we don't understand the level of the rot. I think my brother has dealt more extensively with all the other issues: perception, attitudinal change, the role of the practitioners. And I think many of the judges, I would want to disagree to some extent that most of the judges are upright. Quite a whole number of them cannot be said when we can say some of them are upright, but the system had actually compromised quite a number of judges, and that is why you could have corruption cases lasting for more than 7 years, in court. And like he said, that it shouldn't really actually go more than 6 months. When we want to go into the expectations in terms of conviction, it will be extremely next to an impossibility to say convictions under the existing criminal administration system in the country to have within the period of when Magu came that would secure high-profile process. You can imagine how many senior advocates of Nigeria and lawyers who followed a senior advocate of Nigeria, Rikitafa, for instance, to court when he was actually charged to court for corrupt practice by EFCC. You have 30 of them, 30, not only to go and defend, but the judge had to complain that you are attempting at intimidating the judge. You can imagine how many also senior advocates and lawyers followed Bukola Saraki to the Code of Conduct Tribunal, and how he had to move from Code of Conduct Tribunal, High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, and coming back to start. So we need to understand these issues and context. Then at that point, we would be doing a whole lot of, service and support to the fight by putting many of these things in context so that we can adequately educate the discerning minds and the impressionable minds outside there to understand the issues better, and not how when corruption starts fighting back. And like I warned, they have actually not started. This is what we see. It's just.
Oh, okay. I guess we lost the audio there, but certainly we'll have him back to make his point, or maybe even go ahead on the discussion. Now, this brings us to the issue of the special courts that the president was trying to establish or call for. Special courts for corruption cases generally. Now, the president has also said that the judiciary is not helping, or has not been helping, in the expeditious fight against corruption. Now, what will be different if Ibrahim Magu is now being made, or will be made, the substantive chairman of the EFCC? What will be different from that window?
Well, the first thing that will be different is that Ibrahim Magu cannot be compromised. And I'm saying this on my honor, based on what I know of Ibrahim Magu. Ibrahim Magu has a lot of passion against the fight. And I'll give you 2 examples. Based on my personal encounter with him, there was a high-profile case that I went to discuss with him. And he said, and because there were feelers, there were some people who were saying, oh, the case was about being scuttled. And I wanted to have his opinion about the case. I don't want to mention details of the case. And Magu said, he will not compromise any case, not only that case, or any other case, because the crime, the alleged crime, is not a crime against him as a person. It's a crime against the Nigerian people. And if he compromise that case or any other case, it will mean that he's betraying the Nigerian people. That's the first instance. On another occasion, an encounter involving himself and his chief of staff, and another senior advocate of Nigeria, Kemi Pinero, and myself in a meeting. And he said, if his chief, he was just giving an example, that if his chief of staff or any top high-ranking officer of the commission is alleged to have stolen, and the matter is brought to his attention, if he sees away such a person accused, the burden is no longer the person, that of the person who is accused. The burden will now be transferred to him. And it's a burden that he will carry for the rest of his life.
Indeed.
You understand me?
Yes, we do
Those
understand
two
that.
incidents confirm to you that this is a man who wants to fight corruption with his based on his conscience. And he's also conscious of the fact that he's answerable not only to man, but to God.
Okay, but yes, of course, it is heartening to hear, Magu saying that he will actually fight this war to the end and give the nation a new lease of life, quoting him there. Now, but there are critics who say that this anti-corruption war under Magu's watch so far has been one-sided. How do you respond to that?
I think those who say the anti-corruption war has been one-sided are missing the point. The question you should be asking is not whether the anti-corruption war is one-sided. It's whether those who have been alleged to have committed offenses, whether from the ruling party, whether from the opposition, or whoever, whether such people are innocent or guilty. If you have no skeleton in your cupboard, you have nothing to fear. They say a clean conscience fears no accusation. The question is there proof that you committed the offenses for which that's been alleged against you?
But in this climes, I mean, it is fair to even say that even a clean conscience may not have confidence that he will really get justice at the end of the day because of how the system has been skewed.
The limitations of EFCC must be known. EFCC is an investigative agency with powers to investigate, arrest, and arraign. That's the limit of EFCC. There's another separate arm of government, the judiciary, that is charged with the responsibility of adjudication. And the judiciary is not in the pocket of EFCC. It's not in the pocket of the legislature. The judiciary is an independent arm to act on the basis of facts. Some people have also accused the judiciary. I disagree.
Okay. Now,
I agree to some extent. The judiciary will not make a case for EFCC. The judiciary will act on the basis of facts brought before it. So if the facts are not cogent and compelling enough, the judiciary cannot convict. Okay.
Now, let me bring Larry Suraj here. We're trying to keep up with time. But the issue of the plea bargaining is a strong instrument that has been on the front burner when it comes to fight against corruption. So many people have said that it is not right to have plea bargaining when you're talking about high-profile cases. Billions of naira and dollars are stolen sometimes, and then those who plea bargain sometimes have their prosecution reduced or maybe even set free, as the case may be. Now, if Ibrahim Magu is made or confirmed as a substantive chairman, from the window of plea bargaining, what would be your advice? Whether it should be removed as an instrument, or it should be amended, or it should be left to be? All right, it seems Larry.
Let me just continue.
But let's
you mentioned something that was way out. Apart from the issue, we need to emphasize efficient and effective investigation. We need to emphasize efficient and effective prosecution. We need also to emphasize efficient and effective adjudication. Again, we need special courts. And that's why we are the influence of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption is relevant. They have done a lot of work under the supervision of Professor Sage. A draft is ready on special courts. A draft proposal, a draft bill is ready. And I'm aware that attempts are being made to forward this draft bill to the Senate.
So you believe we should go the way of the special court? Finally, the issue of transparency. We're reminded of the George Ubo case, who alleged that the EFCC, the funds that have been recovered have, in his own words, have actually been diverted or have been relooted, as it were. How transparent do you expect Magu to be, especially when it comes to this, so that there will not be any doubt as to his integrity?
Under Magu's watch, there will be no corruption, either within or outside the EFCC. Because Magu himself is a man who is not materialistic. Magu has a large dosage of integrity, conscience, and that is not business as usual. So when you confirm Magu as EFCC chairman, you are working in the interest of Nigeria, national interest. The question is, members of the Senate, Do they want corruption to be reduced? And I'm sure they want corruption to be reduced.
All right.
And the person who can lead the fight, particularly under Buhari's and Osibazo's watch, is Ibrahim Magu.
Okay.
Ibrahim Magu is the man.
All right. Wahab Shittu, thank you very much for coming on the program, certainly. All right. I hear that Lanre Suraj is back now online. Well, I was asking earlier, but let me ask you this one question before I let you go now. I was asking a question on the issue of the plea bargaining that is used as an instrument to also fight corruption as a way of recovering funds generally. Should it be expunged, or should it be left if Ibrahim Magu is made a substantive chairman of the EFCC?
No, plea bargaining is an international practice, so there's no basis for us to have any issues with it. The problem we had with plea bargaining in the past were actually with the operators, where it is used as a means of letting off criminals, and you would have experience and different ways of looking at it. We've had plea bargaining almost with Tafabalogun under Ribadu, and that was a process where almost everything gotten were actually forfeited to the state, and then he got a lesser sanction, still with conviction. The same thing was with Alamaisia. It was a plea bargain arrangement. He forfeited almost quite a whole lot of everything. He had to come publicly and complain that he's been bankrupt, by that process. And you want to juxtapose that, which is where you had issues and complain about plea bargain, with the likes of Lucky Pinedion under Madam Farida Waziri, where it was more or less like a slap on the wrist, and then the penalty was even paid right there in court. So you have different circumstances and scenario, and that confirms to you that plea bargain, like you can hear that they were trying to do with the retired Chief of Air Staff, Amosu, to the extent that if you want plea bargain, it's no problem. You get appropriate lesser sanction. It happens in the world. It saves the state a whole lot of money going through prosecution. It saves also the institution to do on a whole lot of other things. And there's no doubt in the fact that EFCC is under capacitated now. It has limited capacity to take on the humongous state of corruption that we are in Nigeria.
All right, so we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Lanre Suraj, political commentator. And of course, we've had Wahab Shittu, EFCC's lawyer, and he's also a constitutional lawyer, to discuss this with us this morning. EFCC
much,
under Magu. Thank you so much, gentlemen.